Welcome to the Emerge podcast, where Ronnie Doss shares insights regarding life, leadership, and personal development. For more of our resources, visit ronniedoss.com. Now, let's join the podcast.
Hey there, it's Ronnie Doss. Welcome to the Emerge podcast. Today, I'm really excited, as I am every day, to have my special guest on the podcast, Miss Jennifer Doss. Hi, Jennifer. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. How are you?
Good. How are your children?
My children?
Mm-hmm.
My children are awesome.
I don't know. Are they?
How are your children?
Well, my children, they're a lot like their mom. They're just mischievous.
Hoodlums.
Little hoodlums. It's trying to like herding cats at the house.
Oh, man.
They remind me a lot of my wife. You should meet her. Anyway,
I
Jennifer
bet
Doss is here.
She's a great girl.
You are. You're my woman. All right. So you wanted to talk about something today. You heard me say something. You thought it was a good idea. No, you thought it was a profound idea.
I
to
did.
talk about something that I said earlier today, a phrase that I used.
Yeah, it was I think a fleeting thought, not a fleeting thought, but something that kind of came to you. And I thought that it would be really cool for you to elaborate. It sparked my curiosity. So you were saying something about a security blanket, and that we now, I think, should take time to recognize what it is and burn it. Burn that security blanket. Not the literal security blanket that you have as a kid and that you carry around, but figuratively, the one that we've created in our minds to help keep us safe. Like, that's what kids do, is when they need to feel safety of any sort. That's their security and their comfort. Mm-hmm. We as adults have it in some sort of way, and I think that's what you were referencing.
I was referencing security blankets in that we create something to associate with in our mind that takes us back to something we're familiar with. And so familiarity is something that we all look for. When we can see familiar surroundings, we hear a familiar voice, anything like that, a familiar smell, it can take us back to something previous that we've known. And so there's this old quote that I'd rather face the devil that I know than face a devil that I don't know. And that's because of familiarity. And so when you're familiar with something, it's easier for you in your own mind to associate with it in a way that brings you calm or peace, even if what peace you're creating in your mind is in the midst of something that is not necessarily true. And so we create stories and narratives about things that have gone in our life, and that story that we create, we hold to it very tightly as if it were a security blanket. And we hold to it. And when things become chaotic or things are unknown, which they are, especially right now, I don't want to say more than ever, because I saw a meme the other day that somebody posted on social media. It's like, you think it's hard doing the shelter in place and, afraid someone's going to cough on you. But what about the kids that didn't get to graduate or that graduated back when the Vietnam War was going on, and there was the fear that they were going to be sent off to war and maybe never return? It's a little different. I'm not minimizing either, but that's what's going on. There's just so much around us, so much chaos, so much noise, and it's causing such discord that sometimes when we're in these places of uncertainty, we try to create certainty in a narrative in our mind that we can then hold that picture of, and it takes us back. And the problem with that is that we're holding to something that we ourselves have created that may not necessarily be true. It's only true to ourselves. And so when we start to move into a new area, uncharted territory, or uncharted waters, they say, when we move into that, the first thing we try to do is go back to something that we've created, that we've made up about ourselves or about the world around us. And as long as I can make that true in the moment, then that's the thing that I can hold to that gives me a bit of comfort. And so what happens a lot of times is people don't necessarily push into the unknown in their life. They stay at the same level of thinking and habit and really productivity and output because they're so familiar with what they already know about themselves and have created this security blanket that they hold so tightly to. And I think that at this point in the game, what a great time to reset. This would be a great time for us to burn that blanket, or at least do something to where we're willing to not only let go of it, but maybe let go of it permanently so we can grab a hold of something better.
So do you think that there are, obviously I think by what you were just saying, that there are risks to keeping the security blanket that you have held on to so tight, or we have held on to so tightly? whatever that may be for each individual person, there's a risk in keeping it and holding on to it, but is there a benefit to keeping it?
So obviously there's a payoff in anything that we do. A person loses their temper, screams at people, there's a payoff. If there wasn't a payoff, a person wouldn't keep doing it, even if it's very small and very subtle. So yeah, there's a huge risk to holding on to something you would call your security blanket, because that's the thing you're going to go back to again and again. And when the pressure comes, and it's always going to show up, there's always pressure when you're trying to move to the next level in a relationship. There's pressure in having a conversation where you feel vulnerable or open, because you can be rejected, you could be hurt. There's always a pressure. That's always there. Moving to the next level in anything in your career, there's a pressure to it. If you're an entrepreneur pushing your business, there's a pressure to it that if the pressure breaks you, then you wind up choosing, on some sense, to stay there for a really long time because you don't want to deal with or feel another experience or another occurrence of that breaking. And so it's one thing, and I heard a friend of mine talking about it recently, so it's the difference between bending and breaking. Like, you've got to be able to bend a bit, right? Like, you got to bend. You go into something new, you got to be willing to bend, be flexible.
Right, bend with the winds of change.
Yeah, but if it breaks you, then it's like, oh, I tried it and I quit and I'm done. You can't let it break you. Can't let it break your spirit. And yes, there's certain things I think that we should hold to, certain values. But I think there also comes a point in our time where we say, well, there's a huge risk in me holding on to this old certainty. And so the risk for me is a more compelling future, in that the thing that I could hold to or grab at some point, I'm not even open to it. My hands aren't open because they're gripped so tightly around something, right, figuratively speaking, that is an old concept. And taking that and being willing to burn it. I just saw the ad for the new Michael Jordan documentary, right? I just saw that, The Last Dance.
Yeah.
And Phil Jackson, who's written some phenomenal books, by the way, but Phil Jackson was there, and he was talking about an exercise that he did with the team. And this last season, when Jordan was there and they won the ring, he took everybody on the team and he asked them all to write out their story of what it is that being a part of that Chicago Bulls organization has meant to them, being on the team, what it meant. And then they took that sheet of paper, they brought it in the locker room, and they did basically this. It was like a ceremony, but everyone read what they wrote on that paper. And even Michael Jordan, he read a poem that he wrote. Now, he's not a poet. He's just the greatest basketball player that's ever lived. But he wrote a poem, and a lot of people on the team said how good it was to see this guy who was so intense be really vulnerable, because a lot of times they hadn't seen him that way. But then you took the team took the sheets of paper and they put it in this barrel and they lit it on fire. And Phil Jackson did that. He led that. It was kind of like an exercise, something we might do in a training. And he did it, and it represented letting go of the thing that they were so certain of before, and moving into the possibility of what's new. Like, this is it. We're letting go of all the things that we've been carrying.
Even though what they had been carrying was like what would be positive, but they are letting go of that so that greater could move in.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Like, it can be open.
Yeah. You sometimes I've heard it said that your greatest victory can be your greatest defeat. And I ask people sometimes what that means. They say, well, it means that your greatest victory can be your greatest defeat. So you use the defeat to create a victory. And the fact of the matter, the context of that that's not what it means at all. Your greatest victory is your greatest defeat is if you're always riding off of some old victory, or even the victory over a challenge that you created certainty about that got you through. That certainty or that truth that you created then, it may have gotten you to here, but it may not be what helps you to create success in the future. And so what got you to here may not be what takes you to there. You know, so many people go back, they get stuck in a decade. Like, this worked back then, so when there's pressure, let me go back to that. And ultimately, you rob yourself of becoming something different and something new. Now, that doesn't mean there's not things that we could go back to if we had a talent or some ability. But basically, we wind up limiting ourselves and we get into a lane that we don't need to stay in because it's all we've ever known. And so when the pressure comes, it's like I run back to this thing. And so the thing that I could run to could have been a victory. It could have been a belief that I had in myself that things will go well for me as long as I do this. And maybe somebody had things go well for them on the surface because they were dishonest, or they lied, or they manipulated, or they cheated. Whatever that is back then. Well, that's what worked then, and I've been trying to be honest, and now, it's difficult, and so I'm going to go back to that old lifestyle, and that was what was familiar. So this is what the pressure can do for us. It provokes the old programming or an old pattern. And so being willing to burn a blanket is the sense for me, the term that I said, is just taking this thing that provided what you thought or what you called security and being willing to let it leave your life And to me, the life process of becoming is about staying open to whatever the possibility could be for the future. You've got to be willing to envision yourself in the future doing something. But we must be very, very careful that the thing that we envisioned or the goal that we created for the future with this limited perspective is not something that winds up limiting us in the future and we don't achieve anything more than that thing we decided. I just think it would be really sad to get to the end of your life and go, yes, I achieved all my goals. That would suck. Because then that would mean, well, wow, maybe you could have achieved a whole lot more if you would have set some bigger goals, or were just open to achieving some things, but being open to what else could have come. And so you decide what things need to be, consistent in your life. But you also have to be willing to say that maybe some of the story that I made up or the false narrative that I created that I hold to based on some perspective on some event, it may not necessarily be something I have to carry with me in the future. And so for me, that was the idea of burning the blanket. I came home this past weekend. You saw it. There's this fire going on in the hills near our house. And I stood out in the middle of the night on Sunday night watching this fire burn. The sky was lit up. And I stood out there thinking about how quickly a fire, especially in the desert where we live,
right.
We live in northern Scottsdale, can sweep through a community and just burn things up. Everything's dry. There's no humidity. There's winds. It can sweep through. And I thought, man, everything that you thought that was valuable could be taken from you in a moment. With any natural disaster, with anything, it can happen. And I'm looking at this fire going, I pray that thing doesn't come down here. And then I thought about, wow, how quickly the things that you think are so important can be taken from you. But then I thought, and I flipped it, because you know how my mind works, is I was like, well, I wonder what things we're holding to so tightly that maybe need to be burned away.
Yeah.
Right.
Like you could really make a real quick list of what you really would want to take out of your house and what else could really just go.
Yeah.
That's where priorities really set in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so everything falls underneath that hierarchy of what's most important. And maybe for us, because there's a lot of chaos that's happened in our life, maybe there's so many things that are going on that we would say are chaotic. Maybe the thing that we do in response to chaos is we try to find order in something, and order of the thing that we're looking to find is simply familiarity that we could count on. Well, you can count on an old story that you created because you know it so well. You've rehearsed the narrative in your mind of some old thing so long that you know it. It's like a movie you've watched 1,000 times, if not 10,000 times, and you know every part of it. And so it's easy to go back to that because you know it so well. But maybe the narrative, the movie, the truth of the movie was only one angle. And that angle maybe is not the full picture, because it never is. And so I hold on to the story that I created when I was younger about how maybe I can't do something, or maybe I'm not worthy of something, I don't have what it takes, or people are going to reject me, people are going to abandon me, people are going to leave my life. And so I make that up. And so because I make that up, that gives me permission to not really risk and step into the chaos, because I know what happens during chaotic times. People abandon me, they leave me, they don't value me, they disrespect me, they abuse me. And so what do I say? Well, I'm not going to step into the chaos because, man, I got to keep some order here. And how do I keep order? Well, I keep my senses about me, finding pictures to the thought and the emotion that I have, and I align those things, and now I'm in an old reality. And my present moment looks just like the reality I've already lived in my past, and this is when things don't change. And when things don't change, they just don't change. And people look at that, and they think this is how their life's supposed to be. And so the whole context of this conversation, we don't need to go too much longer on it, is that maybe we all need to be willing to burn the blanket of something. Burn some story that we created about ourselves or someone else, someone in our family. Maybe about the world. Maybe we burn the blanket of how we see God. A great friend, Steve, he always used to say that for a new God to emerge in your life, you've got to let the old God die. And I think there's something really powerful about that. Instead of defending some old dogma, you're trying to discover a faith, something new. And I think right now, in the midst of all this, there's certain things we could hold to, but I believe there's something, too, that we could be willing to discover versus trying to defend what we think is so certain and so true for our life when maybe we don't know,
Right.
So that was the context of all that.
Yeah, so even in the times that we're in right now where people feel like they have been stripped of so much of what they feel is their normal life, and they need something to cling on to. Mm-hmm. They need a security, and maybe they're grasping for some sort of security that they have never had before. So I can see like in a normal situation where like right now doesn't seem to be normal, and I've got my, my quote fingers, in the air. Nothing seems to be very normal right now. But even in a normal situation, when you go through something, you want to grab for whatever that security is. Very unconsciously we do it. But right now where people are just trying to find something, they're trying to find comfort in something right now. Can you speak to that, or feel like there's something that people could do, either let go of some old ones, this is kind of what you've already been saying, but let go of old ones, find a new one, or just let go completely of any kind of sense of security, knowing that this is where we grow in the chaos? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That question at all?
So what would you hold to? Well, here's what I would say hold to. You hold to the idea of knowing that everything's going to be all right until it's not. And then even when it's not, it's all right. It's like, what do we have to fear? The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Like, what are we really afraid of? Dying? Like, what do you die? You transition on. And, if you're so afraid of that, then that's the thing that becomes the prison that you wind up existing in. You don't live in because you're so afraid of the inevitable. Like, our culture, the society that we live in is so like, oh, death is so bad. But yet, on some levels, maybe it could be something to be celebrated. And obviously, that's the extreme.
Yeah.
That's the extreme. Of course, we don't want anybody to die. Of course not. But at the point is like, what do you hold to? It's knowing that you've gotten through everything so far. And then if you don't get through it, meaning that's it, and you die, then that's it. You don't have anything to worry about then in the afterlife, whatever that's like. So what are you really worried about? And that's what infuses us so much. It's like, well, if I lose my clothes, or I lost my car, or I lost these possessions, or I lost my bank account, and all that stuff, I lose. And yes, there are, in a sense, collateral damages that happen, and there's byproducts of loss. But who's to say, again, that from that reset, you couldn't rebuild, you couldn't redo?
Right.
Like, that to me, and that's probably, I'm sure there's somebody that would want to debate on that and go, well, that's a very limiting lens. You don't understand. You're not old. You haven't whatever. But I think on some level we just cling so tightly to this life and this existence, and that's the thing that keeps us from really living. Being willing to step out into the unknown and do something you've never done, going to a new place you've never been, and experiencing something new. That awareness that you have of being immersed into that experience, I think, is the consciousness that you take back to God when you die. Meaning that you live your life gaining all this consciousness and this understanding of these new situations, and then your body goes away. You get buried in the ground. Your body decomposes, and your consciousness, your spirit, it goes back to God. So maybe we're God expressing God through us. So maybe that alignment of us is becoming one with God, in that we understand and we experience things. We are the universe experiencing itself through ourselves. And then instead of holding on to the form of it, in this bodily form, so to speak, it's being okay knowing that, hey, if it's my time to go at some point, I will go. But while I'm here, I'm going to give it everything I've got. And that means regardless of what the situation looks like, regardless of the circumstance, I'm still give it all I've got. And, something I thought of the other day is, if something can be taken from us, maybe it wasn't ours. And some people say, well, I know it was mine. I know whatever. Well, maybe. But maybe in the physical form of things, maybe as it pertains to consciousness and awareness and having some peace of mind, if it could be taken, maybe it wasn't ours. Now, I'm not talking about like civil liberties. I'm not talking about properties and so forth. But in a sense, even that too, we lock onto it so much that we can't even exist and find joy or happiness in the day. And we're driving ourselves crazy. It's like it's manic. And then guess who pays for the crazy? Well, our spouse, the people closest to us, our children. They're picking up on the crazy. They feel the energy from that more than the peace of mind that comes of saying, it's going to be all right. And it will be all right. The planet, it's always survived. The species, we've continued to survive. We continued to thrive. Maybe we're going through a difficult time right now, but I believe that we'll come out again on the other side of it. That's just what I believe. But holding to some old thing, some old form of how it used to be, and making sure it has to be that way, I think that's the biggest problem. It's the idea that the pursuit of something positive becomes its own negative experience. And so you think you have to create positive. And if you're not creating positive, and you're not super successful, and you don't have all these things that you cling to, all the money in the account and all the possessions, that then in some way
something's wrong.
Something's wrong, and you're an absolute failure. But I think we could probably look at the people in our society and our capitalistic approach to things and say, wow, well, maybe money is not the issue. It's like Jim Carrey saying, I wish everybody could be famous for a while so they would see that it really offers nothing of any value. And it's neat, I guess being famous and people knowing who you are, but like to chase fame, to chase those things, that becomes a prison. And as we can obviously see, that doesn't make everybody happy. And so the idea for what I was saying, Jen, is just simply that, the burning of the blanket is just this thing maybe that you have held to for so long. And maybe it's not so long. Maybe it's just for a year. Maybe you made up a story a month ago. We're never going to get through this. Maybe today you're like, you know what? Burn the blanket. I'm getting through it. I don't care what you do. Maybe somebody said something about you, and you made up this story about yourself. And the reason you made up the story is because this person said you couldn't do it. You didn't have what it takes. And it's easier to not keep pushing towards this potential thing, because it is hard to go for something. It's like, you want to give a shout out to all these people that would be in sales, anybody trying to build their career, an entrepreneur who are in it, but they maybe haven't made it yet. It's like you want to send a shout out to them sometimes and go, hey, this is just for you, for all the people that haven't made it yet, but are still in it. Stay in it, keep at it, because that's the process of everything. Who gets to the end of their life and they've achieved everything? There's probably still something, always another level for us to grow into and become. And so if somebody tells me I can't do it and I don't have what it takes, and then I start revisiting that story in my mind, that story then just gives me permission to not stay on the path and do what it takes. And so a lot of times we pick up a security blanket because we think it's going to be safer under that blanket, but that blanket winds up choking us out and choking out all the possibilities.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's the context of what I meant by burning the blanket.
Yeah. And the cool thing is, I think a lot of people may already understand this, but if not, then hopefully you can grasp it, is that we get to choose which blanket we pick up. And even if it's a different one that we had to pick up a minute ago or yesterday or last month, we get to choose which one we feel like is going to serve us and serve the people around us.
Yeah. The question is, do you really need this to get to the top? And so there's all sorts of different approaches to that. What is the top? We can have the whole success conversation, the motivational conversation. You don't trip and stumble and get to the top of the mountain. But what's the top of the mountain for you?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times people don't know what the top is until they've seen it, right? And a lot of times you climb and you climb and you climb. Maybe you've never seen the top. You're just trusting that there is one more step that you can go up. And so you can look at that and say, well, what is the top? But if you're climbing Everest, at some point when it gets really difficult and really challenging, you start assessing everything that you've carried with you and asking yourself, is this necessary? Because if it's not necessary, am I going to keep carrying it? Because it's weighting me down. You got a toothbrush going up, as you're climbing Mount Everest. It's like, the guys that are climbers, they cut the toothbrush in half. Like, why? They remove that little bit of excess weight. Anything that they can do to remove some of the weight, because you're going to carry it up.
Yeah.
That's what this blanket is about. It's about burning it, because it's like, I got to get rid of this. This isn't working anymore. And yes, there's smoke from it. Yes, it might burn your eyes. And when your eyes are burning, there's some tears flowing down your face. And you're like, yeah, but when the smoke clears, I'm going to step through it on the other side. And I'm going to be better. And if I'm not better, then I'm not done. And, that's the approach to, I think, a life that in a sense has more and more meaning to it, that you live with this bold, audacious faith and courage, believing in you. And, it's Helen Keller's quote, life is a daring adventure. It's nothing at all. This is a woman who couldn't hear, couldn't see, couldn't speak. And she says it's a daring adventure or nothing at all. If you think about that, like really, and what people are thinking, someone would be thinking when they say that, it's really powerful. Because so many people are just afraid right now. It's like they're afraid of all the things that they're hearing. And if there's something that is fueling some old fear narrative that you have in your life, you need to cut that thing off. Maybe the blanket you burn is the television. Maybe you literally burn your television. Maybe you destroy the TV. Whatever that is, go out and take a ball bat to your TV in your backyard and just bust it all to pieces, because you're not going to let that thing have such control over you in your life. And the people, make no mistake about it, that are talking to you on your television, in a sense, it's all about ratings and control. Ratings mean people are viewing, and that means that people are being controlled, told what they need to watch, and so people are watching. And if the news is scaring you to death, if that's it and you're done with it, then be done with it. Burn the blanket, move on, start finding something else. Every time you want to reach for your phone and get on social media, grab a book. Have them sitting in front of you. I got 4 books sitting right in front of me that are easily accessible for me to grab. And I can grab that versus grabbing the remote to the TV. I grab those things because I can then determine what world I go into and if whether that world's going to support me or not. And ultimately, that's the whole idea of this.
Yeah. So the key is to just recognizing what the security blanket is, what it is, and then the steps moving forward to figuring out how to burn it. I mean, I feel like you could elaborate on those specifics forever, but the key is first to recognize what that security blanket is, if it's working or if it's not, and serving you or if it's not.
Yeah.
And then go through with your seance,
Yeah.
the process.
The seance of it.
Yeah, I mean, because it's uncomfortable and you go, what in the world? I can't let go of that. That's my only sense of comfort, even though it could be wrecking you on the inside.
Yeah, Jordan Peterson said this. You guys I enjoy reading Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, that's funny. You've got two of his books in front of you, and then that Phil Jackson book, 11 Rings, is right over there too, that you mentioned earlier.
I give lots of books away.
Yeah.
I have got books in our garage, but I got a bookshelf in our office of things that I pull from. And, I think in all of this that, Jordan Peterson said, sometimes you have to talk to find out what you think.
Oh, yeah.
And instead of saying, well, I have to think about this all the time and then I can speak. No, a lot of times you get to speak. You engage yourself in some activity so things can be revealed to you. And Jen, I think sometimes you don't know what your security blankets are until you throw yourself into a situation where you're a little uncomfortable. And then you're like, oh man, now I want to resort back to this. Then you notice and go, oh, that must be a security blanket. Doesn't mean it's bad. It just means maybe it's a security blanket. Maybe this is something I've been relying on for too long, and now it's time for me to stop relying on that. So that would be one approach to it.
Right.
You're not like you're going to sit around and go, yes, a security blanket is probably this and this and this. And you could probably list a few things. But when you put yourself into a trying situation that can be a bit of, chaotic or a little bit uncomfortable, those things that you tend to want to resort back to, those things are then exposed. And so that's I think is what's most important. So just recognizing that can be huge, being willing to be in the process of discovery versus defending. We talked a little bit about that. And so I think there's the key to it, if that helped at all. So
yeah,
anyway,
totally.
Any more thoughts on that? Because I'm ready to roll. We've been in 20 minutes.
You ready to go? Yeah. Oh, well, I hope somebody got something out of that. I did, because when you were mentioning it earlier, I was like, that's so good, because we have that subconscious, unconscious security blanket that we carry around with us all the time. It may take some digging to really figure out what it is, but I think it's something at least worth talking about and recognizing.
Yeah, when you find
really
it just being... Yeah, I'm sorry. I mean,
no, it's all good. Go.
Yeah, but it's just if you find it, and then it's the willingness. It's one thing to know something, on just an intellectual level. It's something different to experience it. And I think to really experience something and to really know it on a deeper level, you have to be willing to step into it. I was sharing with a team I coached, Dostoevsky, who wrote Crime and Punishment. He said, there's more to intelligence than being intelligent. And I think there's some unknowns in things that you can only find out being willing to step into an unknown. Mm-hmm. Sitting back intellectually saying, I know that. Would you believe the people that come to me in my trainings, or there are times that I've talked before, come out to a product table and go, man, I know what all you're saying. I just needed a reminder. And I'm like, wonderful. You've already known it, but you got to do something with it, because if you don't do something with it, you probably don't really know it. And so the assimilation part of information is really where it's at. And so if you take this idea of maybe you've been clinging to some security blankets about a story you made up as a kid, something that you believed about yourself, because of a relationship that didn't work, a job you didn't get, a promotion that you didn't receive, a test that you failed, whatever it is, maybe that story that you've clung to about yourself because you thought it might keep you safe from having to feel all of those things again, maybe it's time for that to go up in smoke. Maybe you let it go. And as you do, you see things maybe that are possible for you that you didn't think were possible. And as you step into those, you live a richer life. I think that would be better than just existing for the 72.5 years or whatever our average life expectancy is. So existing and living are two different things. And so this is the idea of living more. Was that okay?
That was great. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks, guys, for listening and taking part of this. We are pushing a lot of downloads on we were talking today about how many downloads we've had. And so if you are benefiting from this at all, please feel free to share it. We would love to benefit anybody that you know or help them out. And sometimes it's just a little bit of information that can help us to get to and through the next day. And so if this is benefiting you at all, please share it. But we appreciate who you are and what you're doing. You can go to our website, ronniedoss.com/boost, and use promo code BOOST, BOOST, in all caps as a promo code. and it will make a video program that we have there free for you. And so we'd love for you to have that, some videos that I've created. So with that being said, thanks again for being here on the Emerge podcast. I look forward to talking to you guys again very, very soon. Take care.